this is part of, I think, art making too, where you get these like flowering moments, right? And we all kind of work towards them, and suddenly it happens, and you're, have a party, and you're just like, hugging everyone. It's like this amazing feeling, and then it sort of like dissolves into the universe, back into the universe, and you're just sort of left in your cold, dark room, and those are scary moments. I always found like that to be maybe like the hardest part of the artist's life.
Yeah.
The moment after.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte. Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles so that you can claim your own path and make your life a work of art.
Hello, hello, hello. Once again, everybody, to Way of the Artist podcast. We're just going to dive right in. We don't know where this conversation is going to go today, but we have a fantastic guest on, someone who I recently just met in the community I just recently moved to. Today we've got Chad Hershler. He's an actor, writer, and the founder, artistic director of Deer Crossing the Art Farm. It's an organization of creative community builders based out of 5 acres on the Sunshine Coast. The art farm is now 12 years young with all sorts of exciting projects on the go. You can go and check them out at deercrossingtheartfarm.org to find out more about them. And in his words, more importantly, he is a husband to an amazing woman, an artist, Sandy Buck, and father to 2 wild and extraordinary forces of nature, Maggie and Sky. Chad, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Evan. I am truly flattered and honored to be here, and it's nice to hear those words being said back to me. That was a nice intro.
Just a reminder of like all of the things that you do and have done.
Yeah, it's always, I don't know about you, but I find sometimes you've got your head just in the, I don't know, I don't want to say in the sand, but just in the, wherever you're going, and you're not always looking back at what you've done. 12 years is a long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in some ways that's kind of the way that you want things to be, it's like you want to be moving towards like whatever's next, you need to let go of the stuff that you did before. But every now and then it is good to just kind of take a look back. It's like hiking up the mountain. You take a moment to just see how far you've come and see how high you've climbed, and just go, oh, wow, here we are. So
yeah, have a little bit of trail mix.
Yeah, exactly. Take a moment or two to just enjoy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I want to say that this, you gave me the opportunity to come and see this incredible, ongoing, evolving project that is the art farm. I hope that calling it a project isn't an offensive term to you. I don't, because
no, it's anything but an offensive term. I mean, to me, that's kind of what anything like this is, right? I mean, it's an ongoing experiment, and project fits nicely.
Well, rather than me try to describe all of the things that you do, all of the things that you bring together through the art farm, I'm going to let you put it in your own words. What is the art farm, and where did this thing come from? What are the origins?
Oh, damn. I was hoping you would just take that on for me.
I mean, I can. I did prepare some of this,
No,
but
that's all good. I can give this a go. I'm quickly. I will raise a glass to Brandon as well. I'm just meeting Brandon for the first time, and it's nice to. I just want to say thank you as well for welcoming me to this. The art farm it began kind of on I don't want to say a whim, but because it certainly wasn't a whim. There was sort of drive that brought us to the Sunshine Coast originally. My partner Sandy and I, we were both we were both artists in kind of overlapping fields. I was in the theater and writing kind of world, and also dabbling in film and TV. And then my wife Sandy was a costume designer, textile artist, all sorts of amazing kind of things that she would do and continues to do to this day. And strangely enough, I suppose we were at points in our careers where, for both of us, we had sort of achieved a certain level of success, accomplishment, kind of feeling like, oh, there was a goal that we had set ourselves and we had achieved it. So in my wife's case, she was in costume design. She had designed this amazing independent film called Even the Fire Horse. I'd strongly recommend it to people to go and check it out. This is in 2005, I believe. And she was nominated for a national film, award for this costume design. And then in my case, I had, from a young age, always looked up to the actors at Bard on the Beach and dreamed of having a kind of lead role at Bard on the Beach. And the summer of 2006, I said my dream came true. And we actually met at that time in our lives, and both of us had this feeling of something missing in our lives, some kind of gap. Even though we had achieved some level of success, it something felt hollow about it, and continuing to kind of try to keep going up that rung just didn't feel right. And actually it was on one of our first dates. We were just sort of asking each other, oh, what's your dream? And Sandy asked me that question. And I said, well, I've always kind of just dreamed of moving to outside of the city and getting a piece of land and starting like an artist oasis. Like that was it. That was all, She's like, oh my God, that's my dream. You can't steal my dream. So, anyways, from that point, then there was this crazy synergy. 6 months later, my parents were kind of shopping around for a piece of land that they could kind of just put some money down and invest in. And they kind of had a vision, not of an artist oasis, but of something in that realm. So they're very artistic themselves. And Sandy and I were engaged, and we said, okay, we're going to just be the ones to pay that mortgage and try to steward this. So that was, that was 07, 06. And the crazy thing was we were moving to this piece of land on a year to the day that we had met. It was just a nutty year. Anyways, I'm giving you the longest answer to your question. We arrived on this incredible piece of land, and honestly, it humbled us in the first year. It's humbling to move from the city to the country. I think, in this case, we were really like the wilderness is at our doorstep. I was kind of like all city boys. I was terrified of bears and all the wildlife, and then suddenly all the blackberries coming to life and overtaking everything. So it was just a humbling experience to move here, and with no clarity on what we were doing. So we had 1 foot in the city and 1 foot here. And then I think there was this feeling of, fuck, have we made a mistake? Like, was this really what we wanted to do? And one day we were looking out and at the property, and Sandy was just kind of musing, and she said, well, you know what? This property is zoned for farming, and we're artists, so why don't we just start an art farm? And I just like just the hearing those two words together, I was like, oh yeah, totally. And we Googled art farm and saw there were like 8 or 9 of them around the world, all of them so different and interesting. And we're like, hey, like, yeah, let's do that. Let's call ourselves an art farm. And that's literally how it began. Wow. Just with those 2 words. And suddenly we promoted ourselves that way, and that attracted the right people to us, and I think it repelled the right people as well. So it began with those 2 words, and I'd say 6 years of really experimental kind of events and projects and productions that didn't necessarily have a cohesive framework. It was just, hey, this person had an idea, let's try to scramble together, get some money, some resources, and do it. So it was that kind of thing. And then after about 6 or 7 years, actually it was more like maybe 8 years, and we were producing a festival, and we were putting on a circus in the forest, and we were doing these, crazy projects during the year with students and youth, and really inspiring stuff. But we were wiped and burnt out, and we were at that kind of cusp of, okay, either we fold this idea and go back to our regular careers, or we really figure out how to make this sustainable. And at that point, through some miracle of the universe, all these kind of amazing people came out of the woodwork to, I think, help stabilize us on our board, on our staff team. And we've now, that's when we developed this concept of creative community building. And I can get into more about that later on, but that concept really became the nucleus of our organization. And it gave us something to kind of be a touchstone about why we would choose to do certain projects, or why we would choose to partner with certain people or organizations. And it just gave us this really solid framework. And since then we've grown into this solid, young but solid organization that has 5 full-time staff members and part-time staff and contractors through the year. So it feels really, in that way, kind of a miracle.
That's awesome, man. That, the thing I'm when I'm listening to your story, like, you don't necessarily know what it's going to be. You don't know what's going to happen or where you're going to go. But if the through line of that story is like intention, because you're like, I want to do this art thing. It's like, and just right. Like, I want to do this art thing. And then you guys, because your intention brought you together, and then you guys went off and did this art thing, and you didn't know what you were going to do. And then it, like, you went around for several years, and then you're like, okay, we need to really, like, we've been kind of floundering, maybe we need to kind of figure this out. And then you set another intention, and then that kind of activated it. And I think that's such a integral part of, like, an artist's journey. It's like, you kind of, so much of creativity is kind of going, okay, let's try this, let's try that, let's see if this works. And it's so experimental. And then it's kind of reminding me, like, there is a certain point where you just have to go intention, and then let that thing, like, take a direction. Because and it kind of, like, it's interesting how your journey kind of unfolded like that. And you just kind of got to the point where, like, we need to make an intention. Like, not like you didn't say that, but it's like, that's what you did. And it's cool how it kind of got more and more focused into obviously what it is today.
Totally. No, that's really well put. When we first started, the only kind of clarity we had was that we didn't have clarity. And then, you know, and that, we actually, my wife is really, she has, Indigenous heritage, and she's quite, connected to the animal medicines. So she pulled a bunch of the animal, like spirit animal cards, just to kind of give us this guidance as we stepped on this journey. And the one that I still remember to this day is the raven, because raven is really about stepping into the void and the darkness. And it's, to me, that is a skill that artists have. They've developed a capacity to take that step. Not that other people can't. In fact, lots of people do, and don't always give themselves credit for it, but just artists do it on a continual basis. You go in for your first, I don't know, well, you sit down to write a book, you know, it's like you're stepping into the void, right? You go in for your first day of rehearsal for a show, you are stepping into the void. You don't know what that relationship is going to be like. You don't know. So many things are unformed. And, yeah, you kind of develop a sense of both excitement around it, trepidation. We're all super scared of it. But just sort of a stamina, maybe like a sense of endurance for that.
It's interesting, to all of our listeners, you know, we have all these artist laws, which people can go and listen to the stuff that we recorded a long time ago about like all these particular things, but we share those we shared them with you, we share them with all of our guests, and we ask everyone to say like, well, what are some of the ones that stand out to you? And, you know, the ones you picked were like unknown and play and curiosity, which, you know, like I think are both elements that you just sort of brought up in that thing, like stepping into that void, into that darkness. But also, you know, it requires this sense of play and curiosity in order to kind of navigate that space, in order to in some ways counteract the fears and the anxieties that come up with stepping into that space.
That is bang on. Yeah, that is like, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it's almost the, without the play and curiosity, you're kind of naked and vulnerable and like there's just, it would be so difficult to go into anything without that sense of play and curiosity. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting to me, it just like this, I'm just noticing, like, this is interesting the way the conversation's going, because I'm listening to your story and it's actually like making a lot of stuff click for me personally as an artist. Because for one, I coach people on writing scripts and stuff, and I write them myself. But two things that have come up. One is that I have a student that's been talking to me a lot about horror films and stuff like that. And back in university, I wrote a paper about it. And what I learned when I wrote this paper was that what's scary and frightening is that you don't understand it. You don't know how it's going to attack you. You don't get it. You don't know how to escape it. You don't know how to run away from it. That's what makes it scary. Once you solve those answers, it ceases to be frightening anymore. And what you did was, in a lot of ways, going to the unknown. It has all those elements, which makes it so frightening and so scary and like, I don't know, right? But that combination of play and curiosity that kind of goes into it makes that stuff so much less frightening, because you're like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to play at it, as opposed to like, I'm going to run from it or I need to protect myself from it. And to kind of bring this back around, I've been working on this TV series for probably a year and a half, and I've been pitching it, but I haven't really had it all together. But every time I pitch it, people are like, there's something there. But I still don't know how to put all the pieces together. And so it's kind of frightening. But it's interesting because it's reminding me, it's like, yeah, just go into this from a sense of play. Because when you don't know what you're about to do, you know, it's like, you might as well play at it, because it's not a scary monster. But I think there's so many people, like, they have creative impulses and they don't, including myself. You don't go into it because you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to mess it up somehow. But that's the wrong thing to focus on. It's just focus on well, let's try this, let's try that. And
it's the I think there's obviously for a lot of us, there's the fear of getting it wrong or being judged, or like all the normal human emotions that kind of stop us in our tracks in general, that probably play a vital role in getting us through the day without, getting into fights and, or ending up in the wrong place. Like there's a reason why we have those impulses, but then when you are going into a place of unknown or going into that kind of creative space, you have to keep your eyes. I remember someone saying to me once, just like every once in a while, just put your artist goggles on, it's like, just put those on. And then it's like, it's really as simple as that. It's like, oh yeah, just look at things through like the lens of an artist, right? And anyone can do that. And then you're curious, you're open. It's like, oh, I'm really interested in what the solution to this crazy problem is and how it's going to unfold.
Man, that's
great.
You just basically like captured what this show is basically all about right there. Like everyone's an artist. You put those artist goggles on. That's what we're trying to do. And what we try and advocate for is put those things on, because there's all of this vibrant, incredible life that happens when you do that. And suddenly there's also solutions to challenges and problems, and there's creativity abound, when we learn to just kind of do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was trying to come up with the word that's like, yeah, that's it, but I couldn't find it. When we were feeling that gap in our lives, Sandy and I, we couldn't articulate it at the time, and it was only many years later that we could look back and go, oh, I see what that was. And it really was acknowledging that there is a vital role for that experience in everyone's lives. And that right now it's because arts has become so professionalized, which I don't have an issue with professional arts. I mean, I am a professional artist. I don't in any way take exception to that. It's just that it's become this professionalized experience. So a lot of people will be, if they haven't chosen to devote themselves to a career, they'll very quickly say, oh no, I'm not an artist, or I'm not creative, or that's not me. And it inhibits at times their own kind of experiences in their lives. And I certainly see it even more now, kind of in the age we're living in, as we, all the crises that we're kind of facing in the world requires frankly, a playful spirit to really try to confront those and solve them, so.
That was, I started a film school several years back, and that was a big thing for me. It's my big issue with film school, because film school is very much like, not all, some are a little better than others, whatever. But like for a lot of part, it's very industrial. School in general is industrial, and Evan's heard me rant about this a lot. But it's very industrial, and it's like that. It's teaching you to professionalize art, and there's a problem in that, because like something I've talked to a lot of students who like, they're like, well, I could just go to film school. And it's like, yeah, you could go to film school and you'll probably work on someone else's film. But are you here to work on someone else's film, or are you here to make your own film? And to be your own film requires being an artist. And being an artist means sometimes doing stuff that, someone's not there to give you the answer. Here's the right way to shoot it. Here's the right way to do it. Here's the right camera to use. Sometimes I think your education actually stops you from being creative, because you're like, well, I don't have the thing, or I can't professionalize it to the level that they're professionalizing it. And when I made my first film, and I've told this to Evan and to our podcast people enough, but I had to borrow my friend's mom's camera That's how I made it. And we didn't have an editing machine, so I had to shoot it in sequence because that was the only way to cut it together. And this little film like won at this little festival, and I never planned on putting it there. But because my mind wasn't on professionalizing it, it had total creativity, which made it really authentic and really good. And, you know, in this juncture in my life, I'm actually trying to go back to that kid who didn't have what I know now, because I think a lot of times what I think I know now is actually my professional mind just getting in the way of my creativity, you know, like it really is true. I mean, a lot of our conversations in the beginning of Evan and I used to talk about before this became Way of the Artist was just how to balance artistry and industry. And it's such a pressure that artists face, you know, because we're all trying to make this our life, right? Our livelihood in a lot of ways. But
yeah. Oh God, yeah. That's I think one of the toughest battles, because it's I mean, I could go on forever about that, but I've seen like what you have in you know, in a kind of capitalist system where you need to kind of create value, right? That's the only way you can sell something, is to create value. And in the arts, there's 2, maybe 3 ways to do that. One is commercially to kind of make it a popular item that can make a profit, right? So that's one way. So to be popular. The other way is to kind of create a bit of mystique, or like an elitist sort of mystique around you. And so you're written up in magazines, or you get, you know, grants or awards, right? And then I think, no, that's about it. I think those are basically the 2 ways that you create value, right? And that's like, I mean, there's not a lot of room in there for that can, you know, it's hard to sometimes find the room for the playful spirit. But I think there are ways that are emerging, and I think what you're doing and even just trying to reach beyond the traditional market space in a way, like and that was always kind of an impulse for us too. Like, let's get it out of theaters and out of galleries and out of these traditional spaces. Again, these spaces are amazing, and I continue to support them, and I love them. But let's find where there are other ways that art and creativity sort of pops up in our lives and has a role to play, because ultimately that's also going to be good for I think professionals and for the arts in general.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's this whole other element. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Evan. Sorry, but there's this whole other element of art that doesn't always get talked about, but it's the fulfillment, right? Like, why are any of us doing this crazy thing? Because like, for me, I don't know, like, and I don't think I'm alone here. I think that we go into the arts because there's something that we want to fulfill. And it's like, even when you're talking with your now wife on your first date, that's such a great question. Artists, like, you know, that's such an artist question. It's what's your dream? You know, I don't think everybody asks each other that question. And I think that's a great question to come back to, you know, 13 years later, even for you, you know, or just me, like, you know, ever since I was 17 or 16, made my first film. It's like, what was the thing I was trying to fulfill? You know, it was, because I don't think that changes in a lot of ways. Like, that's kind of the question you kind of need to keep coming back to. And I don't think the industry, as much as it's nice to succeed, I don't think it actually answers that question very well. Like, I think it helps and it's nice, but I don't know. Like, I mean, so that was my question for you, really, is like, what do you find fulfilling about the art farm? Like, what is in that? Like, where does that, what's that satisfy for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's the fulfillment in the relationships we form. So I would say that's maybe the like ground or the foundational level of the fulfillment. So there's just these really powerful relationships with unexpected, partners or people that so we, for example, one of the projects we're working on right now is we're collaborating with a group of people living with dementia and their care partners, and students who are studying kind of therapeutic recreation, and people who are professionals in that field. So it's this really wide-ranging collaboration. And in the moments where we get to really collaborate and play and create with the people, especially with the people living with dementia, because they are, and I'm generalizing a bit here, but it's kind of true across the board. There's something that is liberated in the dementia. So there's almost like all the inhibitions that we develop over our adult lives, as dementia starts to kind of take away certain functions in our brain, it actually removes some of those inhibitions. So when we get into exercises and we're playing and we're doing, activities, it's profound and moving, and getting to share that with other people, getting to help others experience that for themselves is probably the next level of fulfillment. So that, because the artist goggles works here too. We always say to audiences who are coming to experience this work, you come with a certain set of eyes. So if you walk into that, if you walk into this kind of performance or interaction with an agenda or with a certain expectation, or you impose a certain thing on it, you will miss the magic, and so that's very fulfilling.
Yeah.
That's all so incredible, and I think to me it touches on what you were talking about earlier, and you mentioned it, and I did want to get into it. This sort of mandate and ethos of creative community building, like especially like in that example of working with people with dementia, like that to me, like I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like that seems to me like to be quite a reflection of what that whole thing is actually about. Like it's bringing creativity to all members of the community to engage in. And there's something about artistry and creativity that can bring people together in a really incredible way. And just that one example just is something I would never have even considered, but seems to be such a terrific illustration of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it is. It's it's interesting because the phrase creative community building, I guess just we sort of stumbled on that one too, and it just made sense. All of our projects kind of come from that place of creative engagement, and they usually end up in some kind of creative outcome. So that's all part of it. And then there always is some kind of community building element. Sometimes the community building is really as simple as, we brought all these people together who wouldn't normally have come together, and they put on a show, and that built a community, that little community, which we've all experienced, right? I mean, we've been in shows, we've been in film sets or whatever it is, like they're little mini communities and these great relationships form, and then these really like sour relationships form, but it's all like part of that community. And so there's that element, but then beyond that, with this project, collaborating with people with dementia. So we have a website, imaginationnetwork.org, that people can go and visit to just learn more about that project. So what we're learning is that dementia people think of dementia as a kind of a neurological disease, which it is. It's a degenerative disease, but it's a social disease. It's a disease of the community. So everyone we're all living with dementia, because we all have to figure out how we're going to integrate people with dementia into our communities, right? So this project has really brought that kind of out. It surfaced that because in order for us to figure out how are we going to collaborate meaningfully with people living with dementia, how are we going to actually create a show or exercises or a creative process that really enables them to play an active role in it. That work is kind of providing some I guess insight into how communities can better integrate their members living with dementia again meaningfully into as citizens, as active members of their community. That's probably the main value that particular project is trying to work with. Because I think in that case, there's this feeling that I think all of us share of just desperate sadness at having to kind of lock people away, and that's the only way we've figured out how to manage this, right? It just feels like that just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like, none of us would really want that for ourselves or for our families. So yeah, that's a great example. And to be honest, similar to the art farm, it's we stumbled on the term and it made sense. And then it's like, let's define it. Let's figure out what that means along the way. And this project's sort of given us another prism into it.
So it's still something that like with everything in this conversation, it seems, and everything about your story, it's like, it starts from this place, and as you go along, what it's really about, and the different avenues you could take starts to just kind of be revealed. You don't really know what it is until you're in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like that is in a way the artist's way, right? Like you go in. I mean, some people, I suppose, when they're writing something, have a very clear idea of, okay, it's going to go to here, to here, to here, to here. Maybe most people, they just are like, I have this notion of a thing. And then they just go there, and that leads them to this, and that leads them to that. So, and I guess it's tapping into something bigger than yourself. I guess that's really what that's doing, right? It's like, it's opening yourself up to the possibility that you don't know everything. Mm-hmm. And there's sort of an intelligence that's a little bigger than you.
It's kind of like we talked about this a bit in the last several episodes, but it's come up a bit about that idea of you're kind of riding a wave. Like you're not the force that's driving it to some degree, you're riding it, or at least that's something that I've been finding. It's like, I think that I think everybody to some degree wants to control, right? We want to feel a certain amount of control, a certain amount of power over things. But I think for the really big things, and especially the things that are new, it's so much about letting go of control, which is so frightening. It's so scary because you're like, well, what's going to happen? Where am I going to go? And I always try to remind myself that, I don't know. I think it comes down to philosophy. I really think you have to say something to yourself, like the universe has my back, or, something here. For example, something that I try to remind myself is the more wind blows on a tree, the more the tree knows it needs to drive its roots into the ground. You know what I mean? It's like the very thing that you think is hard on you is actually causing you to build what you need. And I don't know that I need to grow my roots, but the wind tells me. So I do it, but in response to being in the process of, in this case, being a tree.
Right. That's great. That's a great phrase. Did you come up with that, or is that something someone told you? Come on, take credit.
I guess I came up with it in my own way. I feel like it came from philosophy studies, and it came from just general art and stuff, but yeah, like it's how I made sense of it, because like
Brandon loves his analogies.
I do love my analogies.
He really does.
You just need to write the book, right? So then you've got, I can see that. It's just all you need is, 100 analogies and like read one a day.
There you go. Okay, here, I got a question for you. How much, so you're 13 years into the art farm. How much do you look into the future? How much does the future actually, it's a 3-part question, I suppose. How much does the future actually actualize that you look into, and how much of that is a discovery that you find out? Like how are you finding the whole thing with, because this is an evolving thing. Like it's like it started, okay, it's kind of this, and maybe you have a plan. How much do things go to plan? How much do they go off the plan? And how do you handle that?
Okay, so first part, they go wildly off plan. That's totally 100%. They go wildly off plan. That said, there's been, I don't know, some sense of, I guess as the project has grown, I feel like I've been able to kind of sharpen my focus a little, so that it's less, it's maybe a little less like, whoa, it goes on all these crazy, shoots going everywhere. It's a little more like the plant has a little, help me with this analogy, Brandon.
I love it.
It's, it's just a stronger, a clearer kind of, okay, that's, we're not going to go over here, like that far over here. We're going to still stay in this general direction. So yeah, it's been an interesting balance in the case of the art farm where, we have this incredible team. There's, there's, like I said, 5 of us full-time, many others that are part-time. And then there's the sort of teams of people that surround the different projects. And somehow, this has taken a while, but somehow we've managed to find the balance at the staff level and the board level. So we've got that for the organization, where there are enough people that kind of are thinking more pragmatically and looking into the future. And I count myself in that camp. Like I'm a lot more pragmatic than I think I imagined I was. And then, my wife, for example, I see her as our kind of secret sauce, the kind of the magic in a way of the art farm. Like, and she'll drive me absolutely crazy. Like she'll come up with ideas that are just, it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Like there's no way, why would we do that kind of ideas? And then I always, at the beginning I was always like, no, there's no way, we're just not doing it. And Sandy, as far as that analogy goes, like if I say no, her roots go in like 100 feet deeper. And she's like, you've just made it so. You've made it so that I'm going to do this. So she would do it anyways. And then over time, whenever I get that feeling of like, that's totally nuts, I always sleep on it. And then I'll just kind of go back and go, okay, just explain this to me more. And so she, and there's a number of other people like that. So it's almost like, yeah, organically that has happened, where there's a bit of that balance. And we do switch roles at times, all of us. Like sometimes I'll have ideas that she'll be like, that's nuts, and we still end up going there. I don't know if I'm really answering your question.
I know Evan and Kat so well. I'm just like, you guys are a mirror couple.
Well, which one? Who's who? I'm curious.
Oh, who, like in my relationship?
Yeah.
Oh, I would say that my wife is the one who's always like got these ideas and is pushing to do these things, and I'm just like, you're gonna give me like a heart attack way too early in my life. And she's always just she's pushing the boundaries in certain ways, especially with like taking action on certain things. I'm a ruminator, and I'll often have like kind of big ideas, but she's the one who'll be like, well, let's go, let's do it.
Right. A little more impulsive, a little more like, okay, we're going to do it, and then doing it, as opposed to letting it gestate a little more. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. I mean, I want it to be more on you, but just to finish off, but like I can be, not again, like the roles can switch, like it's never just one singular way, but I can be the one who, because like when I choose to do something, I'm a person who's just like, well, if we do this, then we're doing it the whole way, like it's and so like her kind of impulsiveness, it can kind of be like, well, this is just really about getting out the door. Right. And so then like it's kind of like, all right, well, I've got to make, I can sometimes have to be the one who champions the thing to it being
the finish line. To
the finish line. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
But it's an important thing, because
she gets you off your butt though from thinking about it.
Exactly. Like, because I can sometimes just sit on the fence for way too long. And so it works out well. It gives me anxiety at times, but I know it's usually for the best.
Oh man, that's like it. I feel like I totally relate to that, and that need, like that gestation. And I think writers live in that more, right? Writers, it's like when I'm working, even like I don't do a lot of my own writing these days. I'm mostly kind of just in the world of the projects and trying to figure those out. But I find, I'll be working, and so much of it, there's maybe 15 minutes of like tappity tap tap tap, and then there's like an hour and a half of, okay, I'm gonna go and get a coffee, and I'm gonna like, I don't know, do dishes. I'm gonna go, walk the dog, and I'm working that entire time. Like everything's still kind of running, but it's just all happening in a way that I'm not sitting and working. And so I don't think Sandy totally is like that. Like when she's working, she's in her studio, she's doing stuff, she's constantly like moving and working on something. So I relate to that, that balance.
Well, I mean, everybody's got their own process when it comes to creativity, because some people, they do need to just sit down and like just hammer something out, and other people need time to like let things kind of gestate. I mean, one of my one of the best acting teachers I've ever had, I remember when we first started working with text, and he handed us our scenes, and he said, like, I want all of you to go back to your rooms and just be in a space by yourself, and I want you to read the scene through 3 times quietly to yourself. Don't speak those words, don't do anything. And his whole thing was just like, I want those things to just like start churning up inside you, because like if you start practicing these lines immediately, he's like, I don't want you getting attached and hung up on one interpretation of your first time through it, and it's a practice I've stayed with me. I wanted to just bring that up because, you had mentioned that with writing, but I'm like, I've had an experience with this in acting as well, like there's this give and take, this push and pull, this fluid-like nature to that whole creative process. And I think it's so important what you just said, because I think that a lot of creatives and artists have an idea of what working looks like. And it's like, oh, well, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. And it's like, yeah, but like maybe that walk that you just went for was the thing that cracked it all open for you, you know, that provided an insight that you wouldn't have had if you had just tried to like force something to work and hammer something out. Yeah.
Well, and there's science to back that up. Like I was reading the Michael Pollan has a book. I don't know if you know that the author Michael Pollan. He writes mostly about food, but he has a book about psilocybin, like about mushrooms and all the different psilocybins. Right? He decided that he was like he came from a place of quite straight-laced, and he would never do that sort of thing. And so in his 50s, I think his kids had moved on, or his one child had moved on, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna just explore this. And he dove into it as a journalist, writer, kind of exploring it and all the science and literature. But then he also tried it out himself, like all these different, you know, these different experiences. But he talks about this one experiment with where they took people's brains and they hooked up the whatever stuff they need to hook up to their brains, and to sort of see how the neural networks are firing, right? So generally when we are when we're going through our day, that there's, and I'm going to completely bastardize the science here, so pardon me, but there's basically the front part of our brain, which is where the executive function is placed, right? So that's where kind of everything's flying through that part of our brain. So you imagine that's like Grand Central Station, right? And almost all, when we're going, you know, walking or getting on the bus or going through our day, that's how the neural networks are going. They're just firing through that. Everything goes to that place and then out again. They also call it, or at least he described it as a conductor, right? So it sort of conducts our day, right? And so similar to what we were talking about earlier, if we didn't have that, if that executive function wasn't there, it would be really tough, right? Like every time we saw a chair, we'd be like, wow, what is that thing that's shaped in that way that kind of has a, you know, you know, like your brain immediately knows it's a chair. So what they did is they hooked up people's, you know, brains when they were on psilocybin, and they noticed, oh, wow, that executive function just kind of disappears, and you end up with things firing off in all directions. So all parts of our brain are just going to all different parts of the brain. So you're making connections that you wouldn't normally make. They did the same thing with people who were meditators. So people who had done, like, you know, meditation for a long time, very similar. And the same with artists, poets, you know, writers, very similar. When they're in that sort of flow state, that's what's happening. And so what can happen is, if for some people, if you're at the computer or you're in a certain kind of zone and it's that part of your brain is taking over. So it's really hard to start making those connections. But if you go for a walk or you're doing something else, suddenly it frees you up a bit, and you might release and start making connections that you wouldn't have made.
Yeah. I think that front of your, I studied psychology actually in university. The front of your brain, the frontal lobe, you know, all that, it gets in the way a lot of art. Because it's so controlling. It's so like it follows the rules, and it categorizes, understands what things are, logic, right? Like in a lot of ways, it's trying to put those things together. And it's like, you know, I've told them and the podcast people a lot about this one script, but I wrote this. Hey,
podcast
script.
People!
Yeah, they're out there. But the one script I wrote, it came out in like 2 days. I probably walked around for probably months, if I'm honest, but really like 3 weeks. It's real like gestation period. And then one day I'm just like, okay, I think I'm ready to write it. I sat down, and it was like a Saturday. I sat down, I wrote half the script. I came home. It took me 8 hours. I came back the next day, I wrote the other half, and the script was done. And it was like
Holy
2 days,
shit.
and it was just like boom. And what was weird about this particular script for me was that I don't really remember writing it as much as I remember experiencing it. It was more like it was just living that experience. And it's interesting because it's one of those scripts that's kind of like, I've shown my important people, and someone came back to me today and they said, you wrote that script and it just naturally escalated, because I'm learning escalation in this other writing school. And I was like, shit, man, I just thought about it. I'm like, I wasn't even trying to escalate that shit. Like I was just writing a story somehow and experiencing it. And like the person, he was like, yeah, he's like, you have an innate ability to naturally escalate. And I was like, I don't know if I do. I'm like, that's the weird thing about artistry. And like, psilocybin too. It's like that, where those executive functions, they kind of turn off, and it's weird how it works, but you're not trying to do it. And to me, that's like where I want my art to exist, because I find that's not only the best feeling, but like amazing shit comes out that you don't expect to come out of you.
Oh yeah, that's the dream space.
Yeah.
That's the space totally. And in terms of the relationship to acting, like I don't know about you, Evan, but I feel like 99% of the work I do in acting, when I act, is like, how do I get out of my fucking head? It's like, how do I do that? So I'm not constantly thinking, and so I like, it's been years since I did, since I was really in the rigors of it, but I would almost have to trick my brain. I'd have to like come up with things to occupy it so that I could just,
Yeah. And I think that's, my sort of the motto of my school and my workshops is, we say, like, the actor's greatest problem or greatest challenge isn't a technical one, it's a human one. Because the problem of thinking, like thinking too much, that's not just an actor's problem. That's a human problem. We all have this addiction to thinking, and very often that thinking gets in the way of creativity, if not always gets in the way of creativity, because creativity, in my observation, always occurs in the unknown space. To me, logically, it can only occur in the unknown space, because if it doesn't occur there, then it's contrived. It's something that's been seen before. It's been heard before. It's something that we've experienced before. So genuine creativity has to have some element of like, I don't know where I am. I don't know what this is. But just responding to that. And it requires a great deal of trust and faith in yourself and in however it's going to go. And but that brings us up against some pretty deep-seated fears.
Oh yeah.
And so it's an interesting problem to confront and to try and solve. And I don't think there's an easy solution to it, but it's something that we have to at least first acknowledge and then confront.
Yeah, I think, in some ways it's a practice, right? It's like going to the gym or it's just a muscle that you sort of have to keep practicing you were, Brandon, I think you were talking about control, and that like, it's hard to let go of controlling an outcome or controlling where things will go. And that's that same part of our brain. And I know that anytime I read about kind of neuroscience and it's like whatever the psychic kind of worlds, every single writer will say, we know like 2%, it's like one little bit of our brain, and we kind of figured out what's actually going on in there. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, to me, it's like, okay, then we know that there's amazing, mysterious shit going on inside of us that it's just really difficult to access. So he's like, that's the challenge.
Yeah, I've just started reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle or Tolle. Mm-hmm. I don't. It's one of those books because it's like, it was kind of a mainstream book, so I immediately was just like, no, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, you don't want to like be seen on the bus reading it. You sort of like read it just.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, oh, you're reading The Power of Now. And you're like, how basic can you be? But I started reading, and I'm like, this is a really good book. But yeah, like he brings up this one point that like a single human cell that's the size of, the fraction of, however small a cell is, he's like, it contains enough genetic information in it to fill 600 pages of 1,000 books.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, holy, that's just like, it's like, how can you even fathom the mysterious like workings of and the complexity of life, like just one cell, let alone the whole of everything. Like, it's how do we know anything when you think about it,
Yeah, so true. We just kind of know like that little bit of how we've sort of figured out somehow how to like survive. I think that's maybe what most of our energy kind of goes towards, and but yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah,
that's
and
amazing.
I mean, and to say like, it's not to like knock on it, because like there's definitely tremendous value and utility to that. Like learning how we can survive better and live longer. Those are wonderful things. But there's still this ocean of mystery that we are just surrounded by constantly.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me like, something we have a law in this artist philosophy that Evan and I identified, which was the law of trust. And it seems to kind of actually come up for me a lot right now, because there's certain steps or maneuvers. I was going to say maneuvers, I'll just say it. But like the maneuvers you made, like choices you made in your life that, you were stepping in the unknown, but also it took a lot of trust. Like you said, hey, well, I'm going to move out of this city. I'm going to go to, a more rural area. We're going to have a farm, and then to you did this with your partner and you figured some things out. It's like, do you find that trust plays a lot into, because you're kind of, I mean, from what I understand, the artist farm is not necessarily like, it's not necessarily like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, as much as there's a certain amount of like, you're open to certain things. So with that must come trust. How does that work for you?
Yeah, good. No, it's, it definitely has taken that. And there's been these kind of gut check moments of, back, I would say now we're at a place where it's sort of, we have one gut check a year. Are we going to be able to, is the cash flow going to happen? Are we going to be able to pay all our bills? That happens once a year. It used to be literally like once a month and then maybe like twice a month. So, there were lots of gut check moments. And I found, if I wasn't taking those walks up into the forest and just really thanking the universe for just giving me this time and this experience and kind of really acknowledging, oh yeah, this, like I wouldn't have come this far without all this support. I wasn't doing that, I wasn't sleeping. So it was sort of like, okay. And I got into that habit of that's how I can kind of surf through these moments, because those gut check moments are definitely challenging for all of us, right? Like, you just, like, not knowing if you're going to be able to pay your bills is not it's not a healthy way to live, and no one can live that way for too long. So you eventually just kind of develop ways that doesn't happen once a month or twice a month. But yeah, it was a lot of that kind of trust and really just trusting in that intelligence in the universe that, okay, for some reason we came here, and there'd be these just incredible moments, and you'd be like, how did this happen? How did we pull this off? And then, everything, like, I'm sure we've all experienced, this is part of, I think, art making too, where you get these like flowering moments, right? And we all kind of work towards them, and suddenly it happens, and you're, have a party, and you're just like, hugging everyone. It's like this amazing feeling. And then it sort of like dissolves into the universe, back into the universe. And you're just sort of left in your cold, dark room, and those are scary moments. I always found like that to be maybe like the hardest part of the artist's life.
Yeah.
The moment after.
Right.
And it's almost like you've taken a breath, you release the breath, and now you're at that kind of, whatever that is, nadir, or like before the next breath. And you're almost like, am I going to be able to take another breath? Will that next breath happen? But yeah, it's definitely, looking back, it was trust. And, moments of just, sometimes Sandy would kind of push me through, and then vice versa. So you're looking to your partner, your friends, or your community, I think gets us through too.
I mean, I want to dig a little deeper in this, if you don't mind, because I really like where we're going here. But first of all, it's incredible. I just want to say that you went from having gut checks once every month, once every 2 weeks, to once a year. I mean, that's a huge win. And I think for like all artists out there, that's kind of what we all want. We want to go from, I don't know, to like every other week, to like, you have some consistency. And once a year is like, yeah, it might be hard, but like once a year, that's growth, that's development. Yeah. It sounds to me like, and I'm asking, but like, it sounds to me like a lot of trust came from building a certain amount of experience, building a certain amount of relationship, and building just a certain amount of self exposure to the unknown. Like, does any of that resonate? That's what I'm hearing, and so I just thought I'd throw that back at you.
Yeah, I think it's tolerance. That's it's like learning to tolerate that. With us, I think coupled with some, what's the word? Some clear-eyed, self-critical analysis. It's like, okay, what's working, what's not working. Let's, probably the biggest gut check of this whole experiment was maybe in 2015, where, we were fried. Sandy and I, and it was showing in all ways. Like, we had just had, our son was 3, and our daughter was, 7. But those kind of 3 years, we had growing this festival that we were doing every year, circus, all these things. It was just so much going on, and we weren't surviving. Like, we weren't making money. We weren't, at the end of the day, we were paying all these people, and we were just barely scraping by. And it was affecting everything, including our marriage. It was like one of those moments where it's like, are we going to be able to survive? And we had, we really had to kind of cut, nip, tuck, like do all to make some of those really difficult decisions. And once, it was amazing once we made those decisions though, like what that was, I think, was actually less, it was about getting rid of certain things in our lives, but it was also about getting closer to what mattered to us. We realized, we want to do this work, and this other stuff, as fun and flashy and kind of as much recognition as we're getting for it, we need to let it go.
That's an incredible gift that, being down in the depths can give, is just like, it can bring stark clarity to things, where you're just like, sometimes brutal clarity on things. But that's kind of the remarkable thing about it, is that you find it and then suddenly like you're immediately starting to climb back out. Like it's an actual, at least how I've experienced those situations, it's like a visceral sensation. It's like you've been, just crawling around in the murkiest depths of, your soul and your reality. And then you have this realization that like, I can't be here anymore. Like this can't go on anymore. And this clarity comes in, and that, okay. Yeah. Like, this has got to go. This has got to go. And this has got to stop. And this is what needs to happen. And suddenly you're just like, oh, wow, I'm already up on my feet again. Like you're back up on your feet. Like you're not necessarily out of the woods, but like you're on your feet, like within, and there's something just so extraordinary and breathtaking about that position.
I agree. Yeah. It was, I think from especially from the vantage we're looking at it now, it doesn't always feel that way in the moment. You don't always see it that way, but yeah.
It can be hard to appreciate it when you're in the shit.
Yeah. And like the moment after, you're just sort of moving forward, and then you look back and go, oh God, that was so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say we've approached, we've passed our sort of witching hour, so to speak. We can continue on, but I thought I would just bring it up. We're about 70 minutes or so into the conversation.
Is there a happy place where podcasts live in terms of length? I'm assuming there is.
I mean, it not really. It all depends. Like podcasts are all over the place. I mean, Joe Rogan can do a podcast for 3.5 hours, right? So
right. I've heard about like he's like the most downloaded podcast or something.
That's right.
All time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I have yet to listen to him, but wow. I mean, podcasts are like, talk about a awesome new space, right? Like that's just exploding.
I mean, it's pretty much the only media form where you can sensibly have a conversation like the one that we're having now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because if it was if we were doing video or something, you would need to have like something for them to look at, and it would be more produced. Yeah,
you kind of got to sit down and you got to look at the whole thing. And like, do you really just want to sit down and watch some heads talking? Some people do, and I have, but it's like, it's great. We can sort of just take a conversation on the go with you and just listen. So, we'll just quickly segue to the thing that we always do here, which is we talk about the traditional, beverage that we're consuming. I know you've brought a beverage on as well.
I have.
I'll kick things off. I'm having a beer from a local Gibson's brewery here, Tapworks, which is
nice.
one of the best spots in town. And this is one that they just added to the menu for the time being. It's called, I had to just because of the name, it's called Crispy Boy. Spelt Buoy.
Okay.
And it's just a lager. It's just a nice, light, easy drinking lager. It's a winner. So.
Is it crisp? I'm assuming.
It definitely is crisp. It's a crispy boy.
Well, I'll go next, I guess. So I'm having this thing from Fuggles and Warlock, and it's an apricot IPA. Yeah, it's good. It's more apricot than IPA. That's all I have to say. Which actually I'm delightfully surprised by. And it's also, if anybody is actually watching the video, it almost
there's a video. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, by the way, so when you're picking your nose, you got that. Yeah, no, you can see it looks almost like apple cider. It looks so thick. Because there was real apricot bits in there. So I've been enjoying it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Real apricot. Okay. I mentioned to you, Evan, I have love beer, especially love craft beer, but I've been my body has just started to reject beer. It's like I don't know what has happened. It's a sad development in my life. But so I didn't get a chance to drop by and get one of our local ciders, but I do want to make a shout out to the cideries here on the Sunshine Coast, because the Sunshine Coast has gotten a ton of play, I think, for its breweries, which are kind of popping up all over the place. But the cideries are also popping up all over the place. So way to go, Sunshine Coast. This is made in Delta, and someone introduced this to me. It's a gin smash, gin and tonic in a can, and I cannot believe it's called Tailspin, icy lime twist. But I'm just shocked that this has not been invented before, or at least I've never seen it. Gin and tonic in a can. I'm just like, why? That should completely, take over the market of. But yeah, so there's my drink.
I have enjoyed a local gin smash on occasion. So
up at the brewery there, or the distillery, and
just anything, just like you're saying, these things are starting to pop up now, and it's great. I love that we're it's like the breweries are kind of the thing that kicked things off, and now we're and then the cideries. And now we've got the distilleries now. It's just the whole thing. It's like a whole new world out there.
It totally is. I know. It's thank God, because man, I feel like, I grew up I graduated in 92, and it was Labatt Blue and Molson X. That was it. It was what you drank. So yeah, we're the kids these days. I've got a wide palate. They might be still drinking Labatt Blue and Molson X for all I know.
Let's just jump into our questions.
Yeah,
hey, Brandon?
Sure,
let's
man.
do it. Oh, I didn't give you warning for this one.
Okay. All right.
Chad, but don't worry. We kind of like to just sort of surprise people with this, because we don't want anybody to think about it too hard. We've got 7 questions that we like to ask all of our guests. So just, fire them off as it pops into your mind.
Is there kind of a limit to my response?
No.
No. Hey,
okay.
You can go on for the next hour.
Okay,
as long as it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna match Joe Rogan here.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Do you want me to kick things off, Brandon?
Yeah, you start.
All right. What is the most important book you've ever read?
Okay. The first book that came into my head is Crime and Punishment. And I can't even tell you why, but it was just the first book that came into my head. I read that when I was traveling through Europe as an 18-year-old. backpacking through kind of Southern Europe. And I remember reading it and just, for the first time, just like getting why people read books. It was, I up until then, I kind of read, because I had to, but I was like, oh, this is such an incredible story. And then from there, I sort of became a lover of reading. So
that's awesome. All right. What film has had the greatest impact on you?
Okay. Greatest impact. Well, I'm going to say, again, this popped into my head. I watched 2001 A Space Odyssey when I was in Montreal, going to Concordia. I remember seeing that film and just kind of, I may have been a little high, but it was just sort of mind blowing for me. And then I think I quickly went through all of, the director, amazing director, blanking on his name.
Stanley Kubrick?
Stanley Kubrick, yeah. I went through like the canon of Stanley Kubrick, but that was pretty like mind-blowing experience in the theater too. Seeing that film in the theater is like kind of, I think, essential.
It's a great one.
Yeah.
It's like they've done such a terrific remaster on it. I've got it on Blu-ray, and I remember watching it and being like, this looks like it was shot, not long ago. Like it looks so recent. And the shots, the cinematography too is just like, it's stunning. Like it's jaw-dropping filmmaking. So
yeah. I don't know if you saw, so that what did they call it? It's not like a plinth, but that large, like
the obelisk
yeah, that you see at the sort of I don't know, near the beginning of the movie. Recently I saw, I don't know if it was a joke, but like in the desert they found a thing that looked like that, and people were taking photographs of it, and then this is just recently, like in the last 2 weeks, and then it was gone. Like a couple days later, which it must have been a prank, but it's like
it was. I saw that because there was a few that popped up, and it was like it was an art piece that was like kind of orchestrated by a few people. But
okay. Yeah. I was totally suckered in. I was like, oh my god, aliens! No.
It's still cool though. All right, your next question: what is a song or album that takes you somewhere?
Okay, the album is Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, and the reason so like I said, I graduated in '92. I had a Sony Walkman and that tape cassette, and I listened to that every single day walking up the hill to catch the bus to go to school. So it's like I'm immediately back in my kind of awkward teen self.
Nice. I think you're the first person to bring up Bowie.
Oh, really? Wow. Because but talk about an artist, man. Like that guy, it just sort of, I mean, he was never stopped. Like he just never stopped. He never took a break. Even like his death was an orchestrated art experiment. And I really, and that album, I've got to say, as a concept album, like the concept albums don't really exist, I think, anymore. It's just because of the way music is distributed, but it's kind of like every song's got a story.
Yeah, I love how music can take you back to a certain time in your life. It's like there's so many 80s songs. There's all these movies I used to watch, and like I hear those songs and I'm just like, immediately I'm back there.
From like the movies you watched were playing the 80s songs, so that's what got it. Yeah.
And it's funny because I don't even know if it reminds me of the movie, but it reminds me of that time in my life. And I almost, I guess I'm like, I do filmmaking, but like, I guess that was kind of my like entry into filmmaking. Like, so certain songs like in the 80s, I guess that's when I started to kind of be like, wouldn't it be so cool to do this? And it brings me back to that very like kind of neat feeling. But yeah, nostalgia can be kind of a cool thing that way.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's like you connected with it in some, who knows, like some unconscious level. Who knows what draws us to it. So
yeah. Where do you think creativity comes from?
I think it comes from the heart. Like I think we're like, yeah. I mean, I know we spent so much time talking about the brain, but I think the heart is the heart's this organ in our body. You know, it's so central. It's like, we talk about an open heart. Yeah. I'd have to think about that more, but that's what jumped to my mind.
I just want to say I can relate to that because like I have noticed that when I let myself feel and I let those feelings kind of go, that a lot of creativity does come out of that. And it's kind of like, I do kind of find that in my heart, you know, it's like very central for me. And it's much like the wave. When I let it come from the heart as opposed to the head, it's much more like being on the wave of nature. It's very much more in control than I am. It's kind of like the conduit point for me. Anyway, I just want to add to that because I've noticed that for myself recently.
Yeah, my wife was saying that, you know, when the lockdown started to happen and we started to get these, you know, like, okay, stand 6 feet away from people. She was saying, oh, you know, there's studies that say we can actually feel each other's heartbeats even from that distance, that our hearts feel it, which really struck me. That was sort of a strange coincidence that they've had these studies that's like 6 feet away, we can feel each other's hearts. And then that was the distance that they prescribed that we separate ourselves. So.
That's very interesting, but we don't have time to do. I mean, we'll move on to the next question.
All right.
How or where do you find inspiration?
Yeah, I find inspiration mostly in the kind of spaces in between, I find. So it's like, usually first of all, it's usually when I least expect it. It's usually when I am maybe doing something else. But when I say the spaces in between, it's sort of like I've maybe stopped doing something, something's ended and something new hasn't yet unfolded, which is interesting because that's what I said was also the most depressing time. but that's maybe where the inspiration comes too. So yeah.
Very cool. What is one thing you would tell your childhood self?
Not to worry so much. I would be like, hey, you know, first of all, you are, you know, it's all going to be okay. You'll sort whatever kind of things you are like, you know, you'll meet girls, you'll find, you know, like you'll figure shit out. Like, just don't worry so much.
And your final question.
Aha.
What would your future self say to you now?
Don't worry so much.
You're the first person that's done that. I've been waiting for someone to say the same advice. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh man, that is unfortunately I have I've learned to like maybe be a little less. I mean, I was a neurotic kid, and I'm not a neurotic adult, but I have neuroses that definitely, speak to my wife about that. She'll talk your ear off.
That's awesome.
Well, does anybody have any closing comments just about the conversation? Any final thoughts on the words that have been said or things that weren't said that would like to be said?
I mean, I'd just like to say that this has been a gas. Like I really, Brandon, it's my first time meeting you, and I look forward to getting to know you and getting to know your work, and Evan, this is only the second time maybe that we've met, but likewise, and I look forward to kind of listening to more of your podcasts and hearing this conversation. Well, hearing this conversation, but hearing the other conversations unfold. I don't know if I'll be able to listen to this conversation. It's hard. It's hard to listen to yourself.
We've recorded like over 200 episodes, and I'm still not used to it. So.
That must be the hardest part. It's like, oh God, that's what my voice sounds like. Like, oh. Terrible. We all hate the sound of our own voice, I think.
Over 300, Evan.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Holy.
Is it over 300?
It all started Evan and I having beers trying to work out a script, and we ended up just spending the first hour just talking, and then we were like, we should record that. That was a good conversation.
Oh, right on. And then you did that? Then the next time you just like...
Yeah, well, we had a few. Like, it's kind of started out where we were meeting, and then we kind of just were like, how you doing? How's things going? And we're both artists, career artists, right? So we've been working it out. And then it kind of went from coffee to like, why don't we go to a craft brewery? And then that's when the conversation really started. And then we were like, we need to record this for us. And then somehow the podcast idea came into the puzzle, and here you go. We're here.
Right on.
Which is
great.
We
just kept the beer as tradition.
Yeah, as part. Yeah, nice. Well, I look forward to it.
I want to just say that it's not necessarily summary or anything, but I want to say that for me personally as an artist, I'm really grateful you came on, because you've actually in your answers and your share have actually helped me answer a few questions in my own journey as an artist. And I think that I've been putting some puzzle pieces together over the last year on a few things, and just your perspective helped me kind of go back to some roots, and also just, I don't know, like remember, like, and I think the big takeaway that I'm walking away with here is just walking into that unknown with a sense of play. To me, that's just such a big takeaway today, because there's so many times where I'm just like, and I feel like I used to do that more when I was younger. And I feel like as, you get older, you get more responsible maybe, and you start maybe doing that less. And I'm like, why? Just go into it with play, just go and have some fun and see what happens. And you know what? Whenever I do that, it always works out. So that's what I'm taking away from it. So thanks for everything you shared. And that's a big thing that I'm taking away today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to sort of piggyback on that. It's like, it's like my big takeaway is like, you know what? Like, you'll figure it out. Just like step out there, you'll figure it out. The path will appear beneath your feet, but step out and you'll figure it out. So that's I think that's wildly important. I think that's something that if we really lived that would transform our whole lives. So, I'm going to work on living more like that. So,
well, and we're all like, I take hearing that back from you guys and I go, yep, that's same with me. And that same, it's just a practice. It's like every day reminding myself of those things. So, right on. Now you got to go play those guitars, all those fancy guitars.
Well, maybe when all the lockdown is a thing that's just in our memory, you'll have to come by and check them out for yourself.
I love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Chad, and we look forward to catching up with you sometime soon.
Yeah, me too. And thank you again for inviting me on.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.